You'd think by 61 you'd stop hoping for surprises on your birthday. But part of me still did. Not for cake or gifts. Just something simple. Something human. A phone call. A hug. Someone asking, "How are you, Mom?" and really meaning it. Instead, I got a dinner invitation from my son. First one in years. The kind of rare gesture that makes you suspicious before it even begins. Daniel said he booked a small restaurant. Just family, he said. I should have heard the warning in those words. But I didn't. I wanted to believe him. I wore my best dress. The blue one with the gold thread that my late husband always said made me glow like morning. I even fixed my hair. Curled it the way I used to. Because hope, even when bruised, still knows how to show up. The restaurant was beautiful. Flickering candles. White tablecloths. A view of the city skyline I'd grown old beside. Ashley, his wife, greeted me with a kiss that didn't quite touch her eyes. She took my coat like she was doing me a favor. Daniel pulled out my chair. Mom, you look great. For a second, I believed it. Then dinner started. The courses came and went. Wine was poured. Toasts were made. But something was off. Daniel looked rehearsed. Ashley kept checking her phone between shallow compliments. And then, right after dessert was cleared, Daniel stood up and tapped his glass. A toast. I smiled. Until I saw the flash of a camera from across the room. Someone was filming. My son. Toasting. To me. No. Not to me. To them. We have something special to announce, he said, placing a hand gently on Ashley's shoulder. As many of you know, this apartment has been a cornerstone in our family. My stomach dropped. I wasn't sure why. Not yet. And Ashley and I are excited to share that we'll be moving into Mom's place next month. Applause. Clinking glasses. Smiles. Like it was a baby announcement or a promotion. Like it wasn't the first time I'd ever heard of it. I sat frozen. The waitress placed a complimentary macaron next to my plate, as if sugar could soften theft. Daniel leaned down. We know it's been a lot for you lately, so this will take the pressure off. Ashley nodded, smiling like this was her dream come true. You'll have so much more freedom this way. Freedom. That's what they called being replaced. I looked around the table. Old friends. A few cousins. No one looked confused. Just delighted. Because they'd been told. Before me. Because my son had turned my home into an inheritance party before I even left the room. I swallowed the last sip of wine. It burned going down. Maybe it wasn't the wine. Maybe it was rage. Not loud rage. Not messy. Just cold. I didn't speak. Just nodded. Smiled like my mouth wasn't shaking inside. And quietly excused myself before the check came. Outside, the night air hit me like the truth. Hard. Unapologetic. I walked 12 blocks in heels that no longer fit the same. Past windows glowing with strangers' joy. Heard laughter that didn't belong to me. I got home and stood in the hallway. Looked around at everything I owned. Or thought I did. And for the first time, I wondered, is this how they always saw me? As temporary? As a placeholder in a house they were just waiting to take? I poured myself a glass of water. My hands shook when I held the glass. Not from age. From realization. I wasn't invited to my own ending. I was just informed. But they forgot one thing. This apartment? It wasn't just drywall and square footage. It was mine. Bought in payments from 2 jobs and a widow's pension. Filled with things no one else ever asked the story behind. They toasted to a future they thought was already theirs. But they didn't check the deed. And they didn't check the woman holding it. They toasted to their future in my home. But they forgot, you can't inherit a place someone else still calls sanctuary. When you start forgetting where you put the sugar, they call it age. But when other people start noticing, they call it opportunity. After the dinner, I didn't speak to Daniel for 5 days. I needed time to breathe through betrayal without choking on it. But betrayal doesn't wait. It doesn't knock. It moves in while you're washing dishes and sneaks into drawers you haven't opened in years. On the 6th day, I found the folder. It was tucked inside the filing cabinet beneath old warranty slips and birthday cards from when he still called me Mommy. Red ink on the front. Medical Directive plus POA, Power of Attorney. The one I signed after my surgery last year. I was groggy. He said it was just a precaution. A way to keep things moving in case anything happened. I signed it because I trusted him. Because I was tired. Because I didn't think my son would weaponize a signature. But now I saw what he saw. Control. I called Miriam, my old neighbor, a retired paralegal who once helped me contest a billing scam. She met me at the cafe down the street. I showed her the paper. Her eyes scanned it twice. It's still active, she said. You didn't revoke it. He technically has access to everything. I felt my heart drop, but I didn't flinch. I just folded the document back up, put it in my purse, and asked for the check. Because the moment you realize someone's planning your life without you in it, you stop playing small. That night, I scrolled through Ashley's social media. A smiling photo of her on my balcony, captioned, "Big changes coming soon, house with garden sparkles." Another one, a flat lay of throw pillows and luxury rugs. Tagged, #our next chapter. They were already planning their move. They hadn't even waited for me to say yes. Because they never intended to ask. I took screenshots. Printed them. Every photo. Every comment. Every date. Proof. The next morning, a knock on my door. Ashley. Smiling. Holding a mason jar filled with vitamins and a bottle of organic juice. Just checking in, sweetie. You know, pregnancy brain is real. Thought I'd help you stock up. I looked at her belly. Not a bump. Not a glow. Just strategy dressed in soft cardigans and synthetic kindness. She stepped in without asking. Started walking the apartment like it already belonged to her. Commented on the lighting. On the layout. On what would be so perfect for the nursery. She paused in front of the hallway mirror and whispered to herself, "Might need to be removed. Too old." The mirror? That was my mother's. Brought over from her own apartment when she passed. Too old. I nearly said something. But I didn't. I watched. Because now I wasn't a victim. I was a witness. Ashley opened her tote bag to pull out her tablet. And I saw it. Floor plans. Notes. An email thread with Daniel CC'd. Subject line, Mitchell apartment, design stage. She excused herself to use the bathroom. I took photos. Of everything. Emails. Screenshots. Notes. Then placed it all back exactly as I found it. When she returned, I handed her a glass of wine. Stale. Leftover. She sipped it anyway. "So what do you think?" she asked. "About the apartment," I said. "No," she laughed. "About the baby." I stared at her for a long moment. Her eyes didn't hold the question. They held the expectation. I smiled. "I think you should make yourself comfortable," she grinned. Relieved. And in that moment, I decided, if she wanted comfort, she could get it somewhere else. Because the one thing she wouldn't get was my home. After she left, I called Iris. My best friend from high school. Retired real estate agent. Knows every loophole in this city. "I need to sell quietly," I told her. "Off market. No noise. No posts." She didn't ask why. She just said, "Come by tomorrow. We'll get you out before they know what hit them." They took my silence as surrender. But silence is a strategy, when you're planning an escape from people who thought you'd never leave. She came back 2 days later. Same soft knock. Same syrupy smile. But this time, she brought a bag. Pastel pink. Flimsy tissue paper puffed at the top like it was meant to distract me. "Just a little something," Ashley said, stepping inside again before I even invited her. The gift bag held a stack of prenatal vitamins, a candle labeled New Beginnings, and a folded note with a tiny sonogram printed in grainy grayscale. I stared at the image. A smudge. A suggestion. But something about it felt off. She didn't ask to sit. She just dropped onto the couch and kicked off her heels like she'd always belonged there. "Daniel's talking to a lawyer," she said casually. "Just to get ahead of everything. You know, inheritance, taxes, all that boring stuff." She waved it off like it wasn't my life they were planning to sign away in neat little legal clauses. I nodded. Offered her a drink. Watched her open her bag again. This time, a legal pad with more sketches. A vision board. Paint swatches. Zillow estimates for similar apartments in the building. "Oh," she laughed. "I didn't mean for you to see all this." I said nothing. Because I didn't need to. When she went to the bathroom, I moved fast. Grabbed her tablet from the open bag. Screenshot. Scroll. Click. Snap. A string of messages between her and Daniel. Get her to sign something soon. If we wait too long, she might change her mind. Play the baby card. She'll soften. The baby. I looked again at the sonogram she left sitting on the armrest. There was no name on it. No date. No hospital logo. Just pixels. She came out humming. Touched her non-existent belly with a performance too perfect to be real. I smiled. "I'm so happy for you," she beamed. "We're going to need your room, of course," she said, sipping from the wine glass I handed her. "We've already talked about where the crib would go." I imagined her painting over the walls my husband once rolled himself, throwing out the bookshelf he built with his bare hands. Replacing the dinner table my daughter carved her name into as a child. The thought didn't make me cry. It made me still. When she left, I stood at the door for a long time before locking it. Twice. I put on the kettle. Opened the folder I had started. Evidence plus exit. Inside, every photo. Every screenshot. Every thread that proved what they were doing wasn't about love. It was about acquisition. I added the sonogram. Circled it with a note. Verify authenticity. Then I wrote a list. Top of the page. Take back what they've already claimed. I called Iris that night. Told her everything. Even the parts that felt shameful. How long I let them twist the truth. How much I wanted to believe they still saw me as mom, not an obstacle. She didn't judge me. She just said, "I've seen it before." Good women robbed blind by their own reflection in younger bodies. The next morning, we started the paperwork. A private listing. Cash buyer only. No open houses. No signs. No posts. Just one clean, discreet transaction designed to take back the stage before they finished rehearsing their final act. I walked through the apartment that night. Touched the doorknobs. Ran my fingers across the baseboards. Sat in the spot where he took his first steps. Where we grieved his father together. This wasn't just a home. It was proof that I'd existed long before Ashley's soft lies and Daniel's betrayal in a pressed suit. I didn't want revenge. I wanted reclamation. They built a fantasy on my name. But I still had the title. They brought gifts meant to soften me. But they didn't know I was building something harder than denial, a plan. Quiet. Legal. Final. They wanted me gone. So I gave them exactly that. Not with drama. Not with fire. Just absence. The kind that slams doors quietly and never looks back. Iris found a buyer in 4 days. Retired couple. Cash ready. Wanted something simple with soul. My apartment had plenty of that. Even if most people had stopped noticing. We met at a private office. Papers signed. Check cut. No lawyers with hidden agendas. No adult children pretending to understand mortgages. Just 2 women reclaiming space where someone else thought they had control. I didn't tell Daniel. Not yet. The apartment was still legally mine until the day of transfer. I had time. Time to erase the digital footprints, pack up the pieces of myself they forgot belonged to me, and disappear. I spent that week like a shadow in my own home. Quiet. Measured. I wrapped photo frames in towels. Labeled boxes with numbers only I understood. Each night, I crossed items off my exit list. By the time they found out, there'd be nothing left to take. Ashley posted again. A boomerang of her twirling in my living room with the caption, "Manifesting this new chapter." I almost laughed. She didn't know I had already signed away the keys. To someone who wouldn't ask me to vanish myself for their future. On the 6th night, I sat on the floor of the empty living room with a cup of chamomile tea and the echo of everything we used to be. The place felt smaller now. Not because I was leaving. Because the illusion had finally cracked. This was never just a home. It was a mirror. And now, I could finally see who I was without it. Early next morning, I slipped the last envelope into the mailbox. Inside, a signed document revoking Daniel's power of attorney. A note to the building manager. A forwarding address no one had. And the keys. I left a single suitcase by the door. On purpose. Because I wanted them to see what they never expected. I didn't need to fight. I'd already won. The cabin was 2 hours away. Near the lake where my husband proposed 37 years ago. The porch still creaked. The trees still swayed like they remembered our vows. Iris had helped me close on it with the sale money. Bought outright. No debt. No drama. No footprints. Just ownership. Real, quiet ownership. The morning I moved in, a bird landed on the railing and stared at me like it knew. Like it understood what it meant to leave behind a life you never truly belonged in. The silence here didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. Meanwhile, Daniel called. 8 times. Left voicemails filled with confusion. "Mom, where are you? Why is the apartment empty?" We had plans. Plans he never asked me about. Dreams that didn't include me. Ashley posted one last photo. A tearful selfie in front of the locked door. Devastated. "Can't believe what she did to us." I didn't respond. Not with anger. Not with explanations. Just silence. The kind that says, you don't get access to what you tried to steal. I sat on my porch that night watching the lake ripple. My phone buzzed again. I turned it off. Not just the screen. The entire service. If they wanted to speak to me, they'd have to write letters now. And not the kind you send to manipulate someone into guilt. Real letters. With ink. And truth. I wasn't holding my breath. A deer walked across the gravel road as I unpacked the last box. Inside, my old wedding dress. Faded, but intact. I hung it in the closet. Because not everything has to be thrown out just to prove you've moved on. Some things, you keep as proof that love once lived here. The next morning, I planted herbs. Built shelves. Unrolled a rug that still smelled like my mother's attic. And when the sun broke through the clouds, I stood barefoot on the porch, sipped tea, and whispered one sentence to the wind. They didn't lose a home. They lost access. They tried to evict me with paperwork and pressure. But they forgot, a woman who knows her worth doesn't need a warning to disappear. She just needs the door left unlocked. When people can't control you, they start to narrate your silence like it's a confession. But silence isn't surrender. Sometimes, it's strategy. The day they realized I was gone, they didn't call to ask if I was okay. They called to accuse. First Daniel, his voice tight with disbelief. "You sold the apartment without telling me? You can't do this. This was part of the plan." Whose plan? Not mine. Ashley left a voicemail that sounded like crying. "You blindsided us. You embarrassed us. How could you do this to your own family?" I didn't respond. Not because I had nothing to say, but because they'd mistaken my quiet for weakness for too long. Now they'd hear it for what it really was. The end of access. The lawyer calls started next. Empty threats dressed in cheap legal language. Claims about emotional damages and implied inheritance. But implied ownership isn't binding. And I had receipts. Iris and I had prepared everything. A time-stamped paper trail. A notarized revocation of the POA. A formal closure letter from my bank. Every signature dated. Every transfer clean. They had no case. Only entitlement. Daniel filed a complaint. Said I was mentally unwell. That I'd been taken advantage of. Funny. Because the only people who ever tried to manipulate me were the ones who called me Mom. I hired a new attorney. Young woman. Sharp as glass. She reviewed their case in 20 minutes and laughed. This is smoke. You're fine. Don't answer another word. So I didn't. I went to the lake. Watched the wind kiss the surface until it rippled like silk. Made tea with fresh mint. Read an old book twice. And when my phone buzzed again, another anonymous number, another long text from Daniel, I blocked it. Ashley tried a different tactic. Posted a video on her story. Tears. Shaky voice. A shot of her stomach. We were going to build a life there. But she stole it from us. The comments poured in. How heartless. I'd never do that to my pregnant daughter-in-law. Some people don't deserve family. But I knew the truth. I had the screenshots. The blueprints. The fake sonogram. And something deeper, my peace. They could scream online all they wanted. But my silence had already spoken. The day the apartment officially transferred, I got a letter from the new owners. A photo of them on the balcony holding hands. Thank you for trusting us with your home. It has a soul. We'll take care of it. I printed it. Framed it. Hung it beside the door of the cabin. Not because I needed validation. Because I needed to remember that not all endings are fire. Some are freedom. On the 7th day, Daniel emailed. Subject line, let's talk. I stared at it. Didn't click. Because I already knew what it would say. Guilt, repackaged as concern. A demand hidden beneath fake warmth. He wanted me back in the picture now that the frame was gone. But I wasn't returning. Not to the role they cast me in. Not to the silence they controlled. Because now, silence was mine. And I was wielding it like armor. I spent that afternoon repainting the cabin door. Deep forest green. Strong. Grounded. The color of starting again with no one watching. A bird landed nearby. Watched me paint. I whispered to it. They're going to keep talking. But I'm done listening. My phone buzzed one last time that night. A final text from Ashley. You'll regret this when the baby comes. I powered off the phone for good. Because threats only work when you believe them. And I didn't anymore. I lit a candle. Wrote in my journal. And for the first time in months, slept without waking up in a cold sweat. They could tell whatever story they wanted. But my silence. It wasn't an absence. It was a presence they could never reclaim. When they couldn't take my home, they tried to steal the narrative. But silence, in the hands of a woman who's finally free, isn't quiet. It's thunder they'll never hear. I never sent a goodbye. Not a letter. Not a voicemail. Not a single word. Some people don't deserve closure. Just distance. They mailed me a sonogram printout 2 weeks after I turned off my phone. No return address. No note. Just the image. Just the implication. I held it for 5 seconds. Long enough to wonder if it was real. Long enough to remember how she smiled at me while measuring curtains in a home I hadn't even agreed to leave. Then I tore it in half. Placed the pieces in the compost bin with the coffee grounds and cracked eggshells. Because that's all it ever was. Waste dressed up as sentiment. They wanted me to feel regret. But regret is for people who chose wrong. And I chose survival. The cabin settled into me like an old sweater you forgot still fit. It creaked in storms. Smelled like pine and old paper. But it was mine. And no one else had keys. Each morning, I woke up with the sun on my face instead of pressure on my chest. I brewed mint tea. Read pages slowly. Walked the gravel road barefoot just to feel like a girl again. There was no one to impress. No one to perform for. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't lonely. The kind that says, you earned this. I kept the wedding ring. Not because I was clinging. Because it was the last promise someone kept to me without loopholes. I wrote letters I never sent. To Daniel, explaining the difference between love and leverage. To Ashley, telling her motherhood isn't built on acquisition. And to myself, reminding her that sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is say no and mean it. They never responded to the sale paperwork. Never sent a real apology. But they did update their profiles. Ashley's bio now reads, Mama-to-be New Beginnings. Daniel's, Building Our Future, one lesson at a time. Lesson learned, I hope. I don't hate them. Not anymore. Because hating people gives them real estate in your mind. And I've sold enough of myself already. I made a new will. 1 page. Clear. The cabin goes to a foundation for women over 50 escaping financial abuse and coercive family control. No loopholes. No second chances. No Ashley. I sent the paperwork in a stamped envelope that smelled faintly of rosemary and finality. One afternoon, my niece Melissa drove out to visit. She brought homemade muffins and sat barefoot on the porch with me. She said, you seem different. Lighter. I said. I stopped explaining myself. She looked at the garden I'd started. Wild mint, thyme, and 2 rows of tulips. Grandma's tulips. I nodded. They always come back. Even when you forget where you planted them. She stayed till sunset. Hugged me tight. No agenda. No paperwork. Just love. When she left, I walked inside and made lavender tea. Stood by the window as the light turned gold. And thought about how quiet a clean ending can feel. They'll tell their own story. Maybe I abandoned them. Maybe I lost it. Maybe I was cruel. But I don't need to fix the story they tell. Because I know the one I lived. And that's enough. On the final night of summer, I lit a candle. Wrote one last sentence in the journal I'd filled since the day of the dinner. Then closed it. And with it, closed the part of me that ever needed to be invited into rooms I already owned. Chapter end narration. For video closing, they mailed me a sonogram. I mailed them nothing. Because some goodbyes don't come with closure. They come with peace. With a porch light no one else can reach. And a name they no longer know how to say with power. If you've ever been erased by your own family and chose peace over explanation, drop a heart in the comments. Sometimes the softest exit is the one that echoes the longest.